Hello and welcome to the Buddha and the Coach vlog, powered by Soul Performance Academy. I'm your host, Dan Mickle. The Buddha and the Coach is a weekly vlog focused on looking at the teachings of the Buddha in a coaching light. The Buddha and the Coach is proud to be sponsored by It's Called Normal Athletics. ICN Athletics makes the extraordinary ordinary through adaptive beach volleyball. Everyone should have the opportunity to enjoy and excel at the sport, and ICN offers the programs and the education to make it normal for adaptive athletes to play on any court. Help make the beach volleyball court a place for everybody. For more information or to donate to the 501c3 organization, please visit icnathletics.com. Again, It's Called Normal Athletics. And as always, I'd like to thank John and Dave and everyone over at ICN Athletics for all the amazing work that they're doing and for sponsoring our show. Please check them out and donate your time, or if you're able to, some money to help them continue their mission. All right, we are on to episode 3 of Buddha and the Coach, and the teaching this week is to live a pure, unselfish life. One must count nothing as one's own in the midst of abundance. It's a big one. And for me, right away, I think of ego. It's absolutely the very first thing I think of. And I think there's a good reason, because a lot of coaching is ego driven. We don't like to admit it, but there is a part of ego in almost every coach. Now, whether we use it for good or for evil, that's up to us, just like everything else in life. But to simply admit that coaches do not have an ego is turning a blind spot to pretty much what everyone knows. Now, that being said, I had found that when I became my most successful is after I gave up my ego. And what I mean by that is I stopped thinking I had all the answers. I would practice plan. I would stay up at night thinking of all the things I had to work on. But what I ended up ignoring were my players who were playing for me, and even to some extent my assistant coaches. Because I thought I had the plan. I thought I knew what we were going to do. And it may have been a good plan, but it wasn't the best plan for that team at that moment. And that's where I was failing. And what I needed to do was give up that ego, thinking that I had the path or the knowledge that could always get us to point A to point B, and open my brain up for input from the other stakeholders in the program. And what I found was a lot more success came my way, but it wasn't just me. It was a shared success. And I know that's cliche, that it takes a team, it takes a village, and all of that. The problem is a lot of times we feel like we're listening to those around us, but our ego gets in the way, and it doesn't really let it sink in so that we can use it. What we need to make sure is when we're on those winning streaks and we're having those great successful years, who are we listening to? What are we letting in? Because that's the blueprint for us to continue that success. Players change, staffs change, parents change, everything changes over time. But to have a continually successful program, you have to be unselfish as a coach and listen to those. What worked for the team this year may not work for the team in 5 years. But if you think that you have all the answers and what you say is going to drive you to success every time, that's not always going to be correct. We look at these big coaches, Nick Saban, Bill Belichick. Sure, they probably have great planning. They're able to recruit great players. But they probably recruit players and bring in players that they value their input. Now, again, I'm not saying every time a player comes up to you and says, hey, we should do this, that you're going to do it. But you need to at least be open to hear. Because that's maybe what driving them as well. And if you shoot that down, they may shut down. And all of a sudden, your best player is no longer your best player because they don't feel valued. How many times have we seen that, where a player wants to leave a team because they feel like the coach isn't listening to their suggestions? Because they're the player and I'm the coach, and that's the hierarchy, so I get to say what goes. But then they're not getting the best out of their players. So that ego is what's causing a little bit of the issue. And I personally believe that the more success that we actually have, the more it comes from others. And again, it's not just the skill, it's the trust and the accountability that comes with putting that ego aside. If my players know that it's okay for them to question and come to me asking for an explanation or maybe giving suggestions on what we can do for success, chances are they're going to have buy-in and they're going to work harder and play harder. But it all starts with me checking the ego at the door and building that trust. And we can't build that trust while we have our ego in the way. And the ultimate goal is to make everyone in the program unselfish. From the starters to the subs to the people that never even get to play in a game. Maybe they're just those practice players, but they bring value. But they'll bring more value if they realize that they can come to you with suggestions and ideas, and they have the trust to have those open conversations with you. So that's my challenge for you this week. How can you put your ego aside? Even if you feel like you don't have an ego, how can you be more open and make everything you do more of a community? It's not you as the coach. It's the entire program as the coaching staff. You're learning from the players. You're learning from the managers. You're learning from your assistant coaches. Obviously, that's the other half of this, right? Is the coaching staff. We just talked a little bit about the players and how to equip the coach, but how do you work with your assistants and the rest of the coaching staff? Have you surrounded yourself with those that just pump up your ego or are just yes people and don't challenge you? Or are you putting your ego aside and bringing in people that will challenge you, people that are at your level? When I got my head college coaching gig, one of the first things I did was made my list of who I would love to have as my assistant coaches. And the very first thing for me was who was going to challenge me. I don't want someone that is just going to let me get comfortable and always run it the way it's always been run or the way I want it. I wanted someone that respected me but would also challenge it. And for that to happen, I would have to put my ego aside. For that to happen, Lance had to put his ego aside. We don't always agree, but we know that ego is not what's driving either of us. It's absolutely being driven by what we think the process or what we think the outcome should be of how we train. But we both know that we're not making decisions or acting in a certain way because it's an ego situation. Our third coach, Brandy, is very different. The three of us are very different coaches. And again, it all comes back to we all challenge each other without the ego. I know that if Brandy comes to me with a problem or a suggestion, it's not her ego that's coming to me. It's her general concern for the program or for the players. I know when Lance disagrees with the decision that I make in a game, it's not because his ego wanted something different. It's because he thought his idea might be the best for the program. And once I put my ego aside and realize that's what they're all doing, that we're all just wanting the best for the program and we're not bringing those egos in, our program became more successful. And not just successful in the win and loss column, in the growth of our team as players, as young adults, as citizens of the world, went to a different level. Because we know that when we have those discussions, that it's not ego. And I understand it. It's tough for players. Maybe you've been a starter for 3 years and you're being asked to take a backup role now because someone's better. That's really tough to put the ego aside. But if the coach has put in practices and a framework that supports the lack of ego, and supports the growth of a person, it lessens the sting of that. It's okay to have that pain or that hurt because maybe you lost your starting position. But we need it to be because you understand where it's coming from, that it's not an ego, that this is what's best for the program as a whole, and you still have something to offer. So how do we put that ego aside? Suggestion's really easy. Walk a mile in someone else's shoe, right? Every time you have a discussion or disagreement, stop trying to win the argument and look at the situation, look at the facts. Take it from the other person's perspective without thinking that they're doing it for their ego. Because I will tell you, a lot of times conflicts and fights happen because we automatically assume someone's doing something for their own good or out of their own ego. So look at it from a different point of view first, and then see it's possible that the ego is getting in the way, and that is part of the problem. But don't default to that. Check the egos at the door, look at the facts. And remember what the Buddha said, to live a pure, unselfish life, one must count nothing as one's own in the midst of abundance. That last part's huge. In the midst of abundance. It's really easy to be unselfish when the wheels are falling off the bus and things are going wrong, right? It's really hard to check the ego at the door when you're being successful and you're getting accolades and you're winning awards and you're winning matches and conferences and national championships. But the best always recognize that it's the people around them, the staff, the administration, the parents, the players, the families. It's no coincidence that most of the top tier coaches across every major sport are humble in that sense. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have rough personalities, that they can't be jackholes once in a while. I get that. That's part of coaching, and that's, part of the temperament. But when you boil it down to and they're reflecting on the career, most of them have their egos checked and realize that it wasn't just them that got them there. That it was the entire group, all the stakeholders. So there you have it. Episode 3, to live a pure, unselfish life, one must count nothing as one's in the midst of abundance. I'm Dan Mickle, and I will see you next week. And again, thank you to It's Called Normal Athletics, icnathletics.com. Peace, love, don't suck, and we'll see you back here next week.